Jessica Pegula just publicly called out the WTA for failing Alexandra Eala, and the numbers behind that claim are impossible to ignore. This isn't commentary. It's not a fan complaint. What Pegula said in Dubai in February 2026 was a structured, data-backed indictment of a governing body that watched a 20-year-old Filipina sensation pull 68,687 fans into a stadium, a record for any Monday session in Australian Open history, and then scheduled her on court 6.
I think it was Eala is the match that I was looking at, and there was people like wrapped around the stadium just trying to get in, which is pretty crazy. And I mean, it's cool to see and it's exciting, but obviously, you know, for fan experience, I don't know because I'm not living that same experience, but hopefully the event kind of continues.
The word disrespect has been weaponized in women's tennis for over 2 years now, and it didn't start with Alexandra Eala. It started in November 2023 in Cancun, Mexico, at the WTA Finals. World number 1 Aryna Sabalinka stood in front of cameras and told the world she felt disrespected by the Women's Tennis Association. Not because of some slight in the locker room, but because the court surfaces for the season-ending championship were finalized just 24 hours before competition began. Not 24 days, 24 hours, for the most important event on the WTA calendar. Sabalenka's grievance wasn't about feelings, it was about physical safety and professional dignity. That moment planted a seed in the locker room that, by 2026, had grown into something the WTA could no longer contain. And that's when things started to shift. By March 2025, a 19-year-old wildcard from the Philippines had walked into the Miami Open ranked outside the top 100 and started dismantling the WTA's established order. Alexandra Eala didn't ease her way in. Eala defeated world number 2 Iga Swiatek 6-2, 7-5 in the quarterfinals, a result that sent the Filipino community in Miami into a state of collective disbelief. Then Eala walked on court against Jessica Pegula herself.
Fans that we're getting and making that still an enjoyable experience for them. But I did see some of the courts have like lines getting in and it seems really busy, and I saw some reports that it's some of their busiest.
The semifinal lasted 2 hours and 25 minutes. It finished past midnight. Pegula, ranked world number 4 at the time, won 7-6-3, 5-7, 6-3, but what happened after the final point is what this story is actually about. Pegula walked to the courtside camera and wrote, "I'm tired," on the lens. Not in anger, in exhaustion, in a form of public protest against an institution forcing its highest-profile athletes to compete in the early hours of the morning, and then recover for a final the very next day. Meanwhile, thousands of Filipino fans, who had stayed in the stadium until the very last point, refused to leave. That crowd, that devotion, that energy, it was the first real sign of what was coming. Pegula noticed. In her post-match comments, she called Eala a really good tennis player who takes the ball early and competes really well. Coming from Pegula, whose family owns both the Buffalo Bills and the Buffalo Sabres, that carries institutional weight. She knows what a franchise player looks like. She just watched one. What happened next changed the financial calculus of the entire WTA Tour. By the end of 2025, Alexandra Eala had won her first WTA title at the Guadalajara 125 Open in Mexico, defeating Hungary's Panna Udvardy in a 3-set comeback, 1-6, 7-5, 6-3, after dropping the opening set badly. Her prize money jumped from $289,628 in 2024 to $907,777 by the end of 2025. That's over 53 million Philippine pesos, a 213.4% increase in a single year. Eala ranked 74th on the WTA prize money list, and her digital footprint was already punching well above that number. Tennis journalist Ben Rothenberg documented that his press conference clips and match highlights on YouTube were pulling over 30,000 views within hours of posting. For context, those numbers were surpassing the engagement metrics of Novak Djokovic and Carlos Alcaraz, two of the most marketable names in the sport. A player who started the year outside the top 100 was outperforming the sport's biggest stars in digital reach. The WTA had a phenomenon on its hands, and the WTA was not ready. January 19, 2026, Melbourne Park. The Australian Open's first Monday session registered 68,687 fans, the highest single-day attendance in the tournament's history. The Victorian Filipino migrant community, estimated at 100,000 people, had converged on Melbourne to watch Alexandra Eala play her first-round match in the Grand Slam main draw. And the organizing committee scheduled that match on Court 6. Not Rod Laver Arena, not Margaret Court Arena, Court 6. Fans queued for over 90 minutes, with lines stretching all the way back to Rod Laver Arena, only to be turned away because Court 6 had already hit capacity hours before Eala even stepped on the court. Thousands of supporters ended up watching on outdoor big screens. When the match ended, Eala losing to American Alicia Parks, she had to be escorted out by 12 security guards just to exit the premises, as thousands of fans surged toward her. Eala described the whole experience as overwhelming, saying she never expected that many people to show up even to her practice sessions, let alone her matches.
Things like that happen. I mean, it's you could argue that it was, maybe a poor schedule and maybe they could schedule him on a bigger court. Yes, but again, she's so young and she's just coming through. I saw the other day with Alexandra Eala, that's been a talk, and which is understandable. There's some players coming from respective countries, like she's coming from Philippines, which is now a big deal. She's been the biggest ever, tennis player from that country, which is a big country, and there's a big interest.
The Australian Open organizers eventually posted a response on social media, saying they would take it as learning for the 2027 event. But here's the contrarian read that matters. They acknowledged the problem, which means they had the data. They knew the Victorian Filipino community numbered 100,000. They knew Eala's YouTube reach was beating Djokovic. The attendance projections existed. Court 6 wasn't a mistake born from ignorance. It was a failure of institutional will. Then Dubai happened, and the system broke completely. The 2026 Dubai Duty-Free Tennis Championships became the most chaotic WTA event in recent memory. Within the first days of the tournament, 10 players withdrew or retired, including world number 1 Aryna Sabalenka and world number 2 Iga Swiatek, both citing workload and fatigue. Paula Badosa retired from her match with a leg injury, her 38th career walkover, and was immediately accused on social media of disrespecting the game. Badosa fired back, describing the reality of competing through chronic injury across an 11-month season as a nightmare. Elena Rybakina retired due to illness. Barbara Krejcikova withdrew. The tour was collapsing under its own weight, and while the top of the draw was disintegrating, Alexandra Eala was winning. On February 17, 2026, Eala walked onto the court at the Aviation Club Tennis Center and defeated world number 8 Jasmine Paolini 6-1, 7-6. Then she beat world number 32 Sorana Cirstea to reach the quarterfinals. Both matches played in front of packed houses, with the local Filipino expatriate community filling the stadium and creating what Eala described as a blessing and an amazing atmosphere. While the WTA's top seeds were withdrawing, a 20-year-old from the Philippines was the one keeping the tournament alive. Here's the biggest reveal in this entire story, and it connects directly back to that "I'm tired" moment in Miami. On February 17, 2026, the same day Eala defeated Paolini, WTA chair Valerie Camillo announced the formation of the Tour Architecture Council, a formal governing body tasked with redesigning the entire WTA calendar structure ahead of the 2027 season. The chair of that council is Jessica Pegula. That changes everything about how the Pegula goes off narrative should be read. Pegula didn't go off in the way that framing implies. She wasn't emotional. She was executing a calculated transition from frustrated player to institutional power. The woman who wrote "I'm tired" on a camera lens in Miami is now the woman who chairs the body that decides what the WTA schedule looks like. Pegula's council includes Victoria Azarenka, Maria Sakkari, Katie Volinets, WTA chair, Valerie Camillo, tournament executives Laura Seccarelli and Alistair Garland, and operational specialists, including Ashley Kaber and Joan Pinello. This isn't a protest, it's a restructuring. In her Dubai press conferences, Pegula explicitly pointed to the crazy scenes of fans wrapped around the stadium for Eala's matches as evidence that the event was growing, but growing in a way the current infrastructure simply cannot support. Her background in professional sports ownership gives her a language most player advocates don't have. She understands revenue flows, stakeholder resistance, franchise valuation. When Pegula says the current WTA calendar does not feel sustainable, she's not venting. She's issuing a governance assessment. There's one final detail in this story that the mainstream coverage hasn't fully absorbed. After Coco Gauff defeated Alexandra Eala 6-0, 6-2 in the Dubai quarterfinals, Gauff used her post-match press conference to thank the Filipino fans who had come to support Eala. She said it was great to be on a crowded court and thanked Eala directly for bringing a new demographic to the sport. Then Gauff revealed something that stopped people in their tracks. During the match, whenever the crowd chanted "Alex," Gauff mentally reframed those cheers as being for herself. World number 6 Amanda Anisimova similarly described the Filipino crowd atmosphere as amazing and praised Eala for being a good representation of her country. The new generation of WTA stars isn't threatened by Eala's crowd. They're absorbing her energy and finding ways to use it. The question the Tour Architecture Council has not yet answered publicly, and that Pegula's entire governance mandate now hinges on, is this: if players like Gauff and Anisimova can adapt to the Eala effect, why has the institution that governs them refused to? The 2027 reforms are coming, but whether the WTA acts in time to harness what Alexandra Eala represents, or whether the organization once again schedules the most talked-about player in the sport on the tennis equivalent of Court 6, is still entirely unresolved.